And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Kitsales means people of the canyon in the Tsimshian language Samayak. The Kitsales Canyon, located in Kitsales, is the heart of Kitsales Nation. The canyon is a stronghold of the Kitsales people who once charged traders and travelers on the river a toll to pass through. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1999.
So many people think that the North is new and young, and it is to the new and young people. But when you stop and reflect that now it's been shown that 5,000 years ago, people were here. They saw this site, and you begin to feel their presence. And with that perspective, the whole canyon takes on a very personal feel.
There is something magical about the Kitsales Canyon, a mixture of rich history and beautiful landscape. The Kitsales belong to the Tsimshian Nation and were considered a rich and powerful people because of the natural resource wealth of the area and the strategic location of the canyon.
Well, the Kitsales Canyon is a great site to live and to own, because all 5 species of salmon come up this river. There are a lot of places off those rocks where people would have had their nets or done their fishing. Also, there's a site back here, this mountain site here called Kitsales Mountain, and another mountain over there called Bornite. And so in these mountains, people would have had access to fur-bearing animals, everything from bears and mountain goat, as well as other animals as well.
In the more than 5,000 years that the people have occupied this area, at least 5 known villages had existed. Sunyao, Gitaus, and the Paul Mason site are the oldest, while Gitlazok and Gitsayak are newer. All have long since been abandoned, but there are still some reminders of the past in the area, with evidence of totem poles, artifacts, and depressions in the ground from their homes. Perhaps the most research has been done at the village site known as Gitaus, or the people of the sandbar. Archaeologists have determined Gitaus was one of the first villages established. Dave Walker was looking for evidence of a settlement town that existed early this century, never realizing he'd stumbled upon things from a village more than 4,000 years old.
It was May 24th weekend, 1967. We were camped up on the flat, and I came down just to take a look at the bank. And geology has been my academic background, and I saw this black layer through here. And I didn't have a trowel at that time, I just used a stick, and I cleaned it away a little bit, and I recognized that's fire. And I thought, wow, what a big forest fire. And so I was cleaning it away just with the sticks, and got down, and I popped out a little sharp piece of stone. And I looked at it, and I said, that's strange. It doesn't look, it's really sharp. And pretty soon there was another piece.
Walker and his friend let the Provincial Museum and the National Museum in Ottawa know about their discovery. And 1 year later, an archaeological dig was agreed to by the Kitsales Band. It was a rich dig with close to 3,000 artifacts being uncovered, everything from tools to arrowheads. Many of the artifacts from that dig went back to Ottawa, but some Walker found himself along the bank and still uses them as teaching aids for students he brings to the area, with permission of the Kitsales Band.
Man has been here with this view, with this river, for over 4,000 years.
Minimal archaeological work has been done at Sunyao, or the landing place, because the Grand Trunk Railroad was built over the site. The The site is located across from Kitsales along the west side of the Skeena River and is also one of the oldest village sites.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Archaeology is a study of ancient and recent human past through material remains. Archaeologists are interested in how people in the past lived, worked, and traded with others, moved across the landscape, and what they believed. Let us return to the archives to discover about the Paul Mason site.
The third site is the oldest that's been dated through radiocarbon testing, but it is a bit of a mystery. The Paul Mason site wasn't found until 1981 and is not mentioned in the oral history of the Kitsales people. The site has been named after a Kitsalasu elder who was part of the group that discovered it in 1981. There are clear depressions left in the ground from houses, but the Kitsalasu have no memory of the village. Even though little is known about the Paul Mason site, much can still be learned from it.
We are living in an area that's rich with human culture. People have lived in this area for a long, long time. I want to emphasize that while Terrace is a growing community, that Terrace is a relatively new community. Terrace hasn't even been around for 100 years. The same with most of the communities in our region. But the villages and the First Nations people of the area, their human habitation goes back 4,000 or 5,000 years, if not more, in certain parts of this valley. And I just want students to know that while it's important to have an understanding of the Terrace area, that part of what is the Terrace area are these old communities as well. Well, it's quite amazing architecturally what people were able to do. Like, for instance, right here was a house belonging to the Raven clan that was 45 feet by 45 feet of living space, and all made of cedar without a nail, all mortise and tenon architecture. Each house had a carved post, exterior post, plus 2 interior posts on the inside as well. Altogether, there was 10 houses all over this particular spot here, and many totem poles as well.
The remains of 10 houses have been located at Gitlazak, with hundreds of people living there at one time. 3 meanings have been given for the name of Gitlazak. The people of the place where they steal canoe bottom boards could be a reference to the punishment given to those who did not pay a toll for safe passage through the canyon. If the toll wasn't paid, large boulders would be thrown into their canoes.
And the Kitsales people were very strong people. They control this river. As people control the river, when anybody came east or west, they would have to stop and pay a toll. So there's a lot of cultural material here that's from the peoples of those 5 villages, as well as cultural materials from Tsimshian people along the coast, as well as Gitxsan people in the interior.
Gitlazak has also been translated into the people of the ravine and the fortress because of its tactical location high above the canyon. The village was abandoned in the 1870s when the villagers were ravaged by a smallpox epidemic, but some evidence of it still remains.
This was the eagle pole, and there are 3 figures. You can see one figure here, one figure here, and there's another figure on the other side. And on top there was an eagle. A large eagle, probably about 5 feet across, that sat right on top. And this represented the pole of the Eagle clan. So that's what each pole belonged to somebody, and it represented the clan. It's sort of like the crest that are at our today.
Bevan says in those days, totem poles were raised for a number of reasons, and the ceremony acted as a way to record the event in Kitsalasu history.
You have to remember that there was no written language. You needed very elaborate ceremonies that people will remember and never forget. And what they were doing was building the memories so that if somebody was asked whose pole this is, everybody would know, because everybody saw it happen. Everybody witnessed it. Everybody was paid to remember. And that was the way they kept records.
This was the last pole standing, but a harsh winter this year proved to be too much for it. Bevan says it's sad to see this pole has fallen, but says this is the way it has to be.
This pole was still standing last year. It's now down. So this pole is the last one we have in Kitsales, last original pole that we have. So now it's down. So we're just going to leave it here. This is where it wants to be, so this is where it'll stay.
But we've come to the realization now that this is a very special spot to the Kitsales people, that many of their relations are here, and that it would be inappropriate at this time to continue to do anything further on this particular site because of the heavy usage as a cemetery area and the very strong feelings that well up in the people as soon as they step foot on this site.
In the early 1980s, Dr. George MacDonald returned to the Kitsales Canyon for more field work. He mapped out where the houses in Kitsales were built and where the totem poles were raised. Kitsales was a large village with 17 longhouses and at least 4 totem poles. That village was also abandoned because of the smallpox epidemic of the 1860s and 1870s.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Petroglyphs have been found on all parts of the globe except Antarctica, with the highest concentrations in parts of Africa, Scandinavia, and Siberia. Many examples of petroglyphs found globally are dated to approximately 10 to 12,000 years ago. Let us return to the archives as Mel Bevan shares about the art forms in Kitsales Canyon.
And some of these art forms that you see in here are very old. It's an old form of art. We had a couple of artists, Dempsey Bob and Stan Bevan and Ken McNeil, and some of them came up and took a good look at them to see if they could figure out the art form. And it's an art form that appears to have been used long before the modern, the ovoids and the U-shapes that we see today in native art. So this predates all of that art. It could go back at least 500 years, maybe more.
A design or figure carved on a rock is called a petroglyph. In Kitsales Canyon, most of the petroglyphs depict humans or animals. No one seems to know why the petroglyphs were created or how long they've been here. 5 separate petroglyphs have been located on Ringbolt Island, and one of the largest is known as Rescued Rock. On April 5, 1975, this petroglyph was moved from its original location near the river to a higher point on the island. The petroglyph was in danger of slipping into the Skeena River.
Well, the Kitsales don't want it taken off the island. It was carved on this island, it was born here, and this is where it belongs. And so the move will be from its present location simply up to on the other side of that driftwood. It's the highest point on the island. We've prepared the site. There are 2 or 3 trees that had to be sacrificed, taken down for this site, but it'll be safe up there.
Of all the petroglyphs on Ringbolt, perhaps the most recognizable is that of the small blackfish. The Terrace Public Library has permission from the Kitsales Band to use it as a symbol. There are also 4 single petroglyphs on Dry Island. These appear to depict transformation. One of the petroglyphs illustrates this by its transformation from a person's face to an animal form, depending on what angle you look at it from. Because the Kitsalasu did not have a written history, there has been some speculation that the petroglyphs were some way of communicating, while others wonder if it was simply an example of their art form. The Kitsales Band is interested in maintaining the village site and is considering opening the area to the public for education purposes. For the Kitsales, the area is a representation of their past, and now they're working on a new beginning.
You're looking at the end of it, of almost an era. Now, we're into treaty negotiations, so there's a whole new way of life that we're moving into. And this pole represents the end of one way of life. So this was the last evidence of it, that somebody carved it over 100 years ago. And now it's over.
During the late 1950s and through the 60s and early 70s, the bubbles from these hot waters provided for many occasional relaxation and recreation. The Lake House Hot Springs have been a favorite spot for decades. Early settlers in the Northwest knew well of the hot springs along Lake House Lake. It was developed into a small resort. The only buildings that remain of that development were constructed in 1976. But this coffee shop and pool are about to become part of something new. In the fall of 1984, the BC government put the hot springs up for sale. Just over a year ago, longtime Kitimat businessman Bert Orleans was given the option to buy the hot springs on the promise that he would develop them. His company is called Mount Layton Hot Springs Resort Limited. Last fall and throughout the winter, construction began on the basics of the project.
Mr. Orleans, we've all been rather interested the last few months after this property was sold to you about what's going to be happening with the hot springs.
We enjoyed an excellent winter, and most of the groundwork has been done. So from now on, it's an uphill battle. We had ideal winter condition, very little snow, but it was very cold, so heavy equipment could work in the swampy areas.
Over the winter, crews cleared several acres on the hot springs property, but with most of it being swamp, the area had to be drained. A large drainage ditch was put in to lower the water table. Without the area being dried out, the use of heavy equipment would have been almost impossible. The decayed timber was also removed, but Orleans says he left the good timber to preserve a park environment. These areas were cleared out and will become the sites of picnic and parkland areas. One of the major aspects of the project is a sewage treatment system. It's comprised of 3 large lagoons several hundred feet in length. At this point, the lagoons are being used as drainage canals. Effluent from the resort will be pumped into the lagoon system. It will start in the first one, then it will be moved successively to 2 other lagoons after going through the required treatment at each phase of the system.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Today, the mineral pools at Mount Layton Hot Springs Resort are not open to the public. Water slides sag further and further each year, and half the buildings on the property have sat vacant, plastic tacked along the framed windows in the illusion of the halting construction that was momentary. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to 1985 when the hot springs were just purchased from the BC government.
Orleans says the system has been built to handle more than double the required capacity for the resort he plans. In the final stage of treatment, the effluent is passed through a lagoon full of bulrushes to remove chemical nutrients. Once treatment is complete, the effluent will move down a canal towards Lake House Lake.
What is my major concern? By the size of the investment, if I destroy the environment, I'm certainly wasting my money. I have hired the best expertise available to advise me on the construction of the sewage lagoons. Also, waste management is keeping a very watchful eye on it. And I made it very clear, if they want 100%, I want 150%. I rather close a project than pollute the environment.
Waste management officials say the dilution required will ensure the lake water remains clean. They also say the amount of waste to be dumped is very small. With much of the initial groundwork and planning done, Orleans says work on the actual building portion of the resort will begin soon.
Oh, I'm hopeful that by the 1st of April we should be start pouring concrete foundations for the additions to the existing structure, and driving piles for the support columns for the water slide towers, and continue from there on. And come early summer or midsummer, some of the children that are coming down here now and looking for the water slide should be able to slide, take their first slides.
Mm-hmm. Right. So along with the water slides, what else are we going to be seeing during the summer then?
course, the existing pool will be refurbished, and there will be a restaurant seating 250 people, a coffee shop, fast food area, and picnic tables, and a park area being developed, including the parking lots as required. And, well, that's basically it.
So far, we have talked about the plans that Orleans wants to have in place when the hot springs are open this summer to the public. But he has even larger plans for the development.
How long do you think it's going to take to have this project where you want to have it, with buildings and all that?
Well, I don't know if I live long enough. The area is so large, and the endless possibilities out here. And unfortunately, we have most of our own equipment, so in the slack time we can utilize our own equipment and build from horse trails to, you name it, trout streams, and developing of the beach is going to be a fair-sized project. By this fall, if everything goes well, I intend to lay the foundations for the hotel. It will be built in stages, but the floor area or the foundations will be large enough for future developments of a high-rise. Preliminary plans have been drawn up, but I'm still not really sure which way it's going to go.
As far as hotel and so on, the work you're going to be starting on by next fall or during next fall, what size of a development is that going to be?
Right now I'm looking at an 80-room hotel, was built around the existing main hot spring, and the lobby shall be South Pacific style, tropical.
And we're going to be where we're standing is.
Where we're standing right now, there will be palm trees growing.
The Insurance Corporation and Motorcycle Federation want to reduce clashes between motorcycles and other vehicles. The Terrace Roadrunners Motorcycle Club recently held the skill-sharpening event for motorcyclists. Local representative of the BC Motorcycle Federation, James Gillum, says this may be the most dangerous time of year for motorcyclists after a long winter of inactivity and motorists unaccustomed to looking out for them. The Motorcycle Federation's campaign with ICBC is to make motorists more aware of the needs of motorcycles.
Motorcycles require as much space as any other automobile on the highway. Just because a bike tends to head to perhaps one side of a lane or another doesn't mean to say that that motorcyclist is giving, the driver behind the idea that they should be going past him. It's because the motorcycle needs to use the best part of whatever road it's on, and that isn't always straight up the middle. In fact, it very seldom is straight up the middle.
If drivers looked more carefully for motorcyclists, many accidents could be prevented.
Of all two-vehicle accidents, about 70% are caused by a motor vehicle other than a motorcycle violating a motorcyclist's right-of-way. Usually that's the normal thing. Unfortunately, is the left-turning motorist pulls across a motorcycle that is going straight ahead, and unfortunately the most common comment is, "I'm sorry, I didn't see you."
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.